Hey, you. Yeah, you. The flight attendant's voice sliced through the first-class cabin like a blade dipped in contempt. Do you even know where you're sitting, little girl? Or did you wander up here looking for free snacks? Heads turned. Conversation stalled. The soft hum of the commercial airline cabin suddenly felt louder, heavier. The girl looked up slowly. She was 12 years old, black, with deep brown skin and careful eyes that had learned early how to read rooms before speaking in them. Her name was Ava Carter. She wore a simple navy hoodie, headphones resting loosely around her neck, a paperback folded neatly on her tray table. No parent beside her, no entourage, just calm. Too calm for a place that thrived on visible power. The flight attendant sneered. "First class isn't a daycare," she muttered loudly, not bothering to lower her voice. "And it's definitely not a charity ride for kids who don't belong." A few passengers shifted, uncomfortably. One man cleared his throat. No one spoke. The attendant leaned closer, scanning Ava from head to toe with open disgust. "Let me guess," she said with a sharp laugh. "You're one of those miracle upgrades. Someone messed up the system, and now I've got to play babysitter." Ava blinked once. She did not shrink. She did not argue. The woman straightened, rolling her eyes theatrically. She was Marilyn Holt, late 40s, white, impeccably groomed, her senior flight attendant badge polished from years of unchecked authority. She had flown this route for over a decade. She knew exactly how much she could get away with. "You people always think rules don't apply to you," Marilyn continued, voice dripping with sarcasm. "This is a premium cabin. Executives, professionals, not whatever this is." Ava's fingers tightened slightly around the edge of her book. "I have a boarding pass," Ava said quietly. Marilyn laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Oh, sweetheart, lots of people have papers. Doesn't mean they understand airline policy." She gestured broadly, making sure nearby passengers could hear. "Passenger rights don't include turning first class into a playground." The word rights hung in the air like a challenge. Ava glanced down at her tray. Breakfast service had already been placed in front of her. The eggs glistened strangely. The smell was faint, sour, wrong. She inhaled once, controlled. "Excuse me," Ava said, raising her hand just slightly. "I think there's a problem with the food." Marilyn froze, then scoffed. "Oh, here we go," she said loudly. "Now it's the food. What is it today? Too cold? Too fancy? Or did it magically go bad the moment you touched it?" A ripple of discomfort moved through the cabin. Ava didn't respond to the sarcasm. She simply pushed the tray forward a few inches. "It smells spoiled," she said. "I don't think it's safe." Marilyn leaned in, face inches from the girls. "Listen to me carefully," she hissed. "You don't get to make accusations up here. Not in first class, not when grown people are trying to travel." She straightened and addressed the cabin like a performer. Kids these days, entitled, dramatic, always looking for attention. Probably read something online and decided to play food inspector. Ava felt heat rise in her chest, but she stayed still. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Breathe first, speak second." Marilyn folded her arms. "You eat what you're served, or you move back where you belong. Those are the rules." Ava looked around. Suits, watches, quiet faces pretending not to see. "This is a commercial airline," Ava said evenly. "And airline policy says—" Marilyn cut her off with a sharp laugh. "Oh, don't you dare start quoting rules at me, little girl. I've been flying longer than you've been alive." A pause. Ava met her eyes. "My father helped write some of them," she said softly. The cabin went still, not because they believed her, but because of the way she said it. No bravado, no threat, just fact. Marilyn's smile twisted. "Sure he did," she said. "And I'm the CEO." She tapped her communicator. "Captain, we've got a situation up here. Possible disruptive passenger. Minor?" The word minor landed like a verdict. Ava lowered her gaze again, hands folded, heart steady. Better is one who is slow to anger than a mighty warrior, her father used to read to her at night, and one with self-control than one who takes a city. Proverbs 16:32. She whispered it under her breath now, not for comfort, but for clarity. The plane had not moved yet, but something had already shifted. If you have ever been judged before being heard, dismissed before being understood, then what happens next with this little girl will make you hold your breath. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and stay with Dignity Voices to follow a story where quiet power speaks louder than hate. Because when the cabin doors close, privilege is about to collide with something it never saw coming. The aircraft still hadn't moved. Outside the window, runway lights blinked patiently, unaware of the quiet storm brewing inside the first-class cabin. The engines hummed at idle, a low mechanical breath, as if the plane itself were waiting to see who would win. Marilyn Holt stood in the aisle with her arms crossed, posture rigid with authority. She hadn't left. She hadn't softened. If anything, her contempt had sharpened. She looked down at Ava like a teacher staring at a misbehaving student, except there was no pretense of care. "You know," Marilyn said loudly, making sure the surrounding rows could hear, "this is exactly what happens when airlines get too soft." She shook her head. "Rules stop meaning anything." Ava remained seated, hands folded in her lap, eyes lowered. She had learned early that silence could be mistaken for weakness and weaponized against you. Marilyn tapped the tray again, harder this time. The plastic rattled. "Eat it," she said, "or we can do this the official way." A man across the aisle shifted in his seat. He looked like a lawyer, tailored suit, silver hair, eyes darting between Ava and Marilyn. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. No one wanted to be involved. "That food isn't safe," Ava said quietly. Marilyn rolled her eyes. "You keep saying that like it matters." She leaned toward another passenger and stage whispered, "These kids watch one documentary and suddenly think they're experts." A few people laughed, nervously, enough to encourage her. Marilyn straightened and pressed her communicator again. "Purser to first class," she said. "I need support. We've got a passenger refusing service and causing a disturbance." Ava looked up. "I'm not refusing service," she said. "I'm asking for it to be checked." Marilyn scoffed. "You don't ask up here. You comply." The word comply landed heavily. The purser, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, appeared at the edge of the cabin. He glanced at Marilyn, then at Ava. "What seems to be the issue?" he asked. Marilyn didn't miss a beat. "The child is claiming her meal is spoiled. She's been disruptive, argumentative, and, frankly," she lowered her voice slightly, "out of her depth." The purser looked at Ava. "Is that true?" Ava met his gaze. "Sir, the food smells spoiled. I don't feel comfortable eating it." The purser hesitated. Marilyn jumped in. "We've already inspected it. It's fine. She's just being difficult." "That's not true," Ava said calmly. "No one inspected it." Marilyn's jaw tightened. "Careful," she warned. "You're already pushing your passenger rights pretty far." The purser shifted again. He looked at the tray. He didn't touch it. "Well," he said slowly, "maybe we can just—" "No," Marilyn snapped. "We're not setting a precedent." She turned back to Ava, her voice dropping into something colder. "Let me explain something to you. This is first class. People up here pay for peace, not drama, not accusations, and definitely not lessons from a child who doesn't understand how this airline works." Ava's chest tightened, not with fear, but with something heavier. Recognition. This wasn't about food. This was about who Marilyn believed belonged, and who didn't. "I understand airline policy," Ava said softly. Marilyn laughed again, louder this time. "Oh, please, you understand TikTok, not policy." The purser looked uncomfortable now. "Marilyn," she cut him off. "If she doesn't eat, We move her. That's procedure." "That's not procedure," Ava said. Marilyn leaned in so close Ava could smell her perfume. Sharp, expensive, suffocating. "Don't correct me," she whispered. "You're already on thin ice." Ava's hands trembled once, just once, then stilled. Around them, phones were no longer discreet. Screens glowed. A woman 2 rows back was recording openly now, lips pressed tight with unease. The purser sighed. "Let me check with the captain." Marilyn smirked. "Go ahead." She straightened, victorious already. She knew how this would end. It always did. Ava watched the purser disappear toward the cockpit. She looked down at the tray again. The smell was stronger now, undeniable. Her father's voice returned, steady and clear. "When safety is ignored, you don't argue. You escalate." Ava reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded card. Not flashy, not official looking, just words. She waited. The purser returned, face pale. "The captain wants details," he said. Ava looked up. "I can give them," she said calmly. "If he has a moment." Marilyn laughed, a short, sharp bark. "Oh, this I've got to hear." She didn't notice the way the purser's expression had changed, or the way the cabin had gone silent again, not out of discomfort this time, but anticipation. Because the next words Ava was about to say would not humiliate her. They would humiliate the system. If you have ever watched someone abuse power while everyone else stayed silent, then what happens next will make your heart race. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and stay with Dignity Voices, where quiet courage always finds its moment, because the humiliation goes public, and the entire cabin is about to witness how far cruelty will go before truth steps in. The captain did not come. That absence alone told Marilyn everything she needed to know. She stood taller in the aisle, emboldened by silence from the cockpit and the stillness of the runway. In her mind, authority had already chosen a side, and it wasn't the child's. "Well," Marilyn said loudly, snapping her fingers once as if calling a pet. "You wanted attention, you've got it. Now explain to the whole cabin why you're holding up a flight full of paying adults." Every head turned. Ava remained seated in seat 1A, small against the leather and polished chrome that screamed money, status, belonging. Her feet didn't reach the floor. Her hands rested neatly in her lap. "I'm not holding up the flight," Ava said softly. "I reported unsafe food." Marilyn burst out laughing. "Unsafe?" She turned to the cabin, spreading her arms. "Did you hear that? Apparently we're running a biohazard up here." A few passengers chuckled. Others looked away. Marilyn's voice sharpened. "Let me make this very clear. This airline has standards. We don't serve garbage. What you're doing is slander, accusing a commercial airline of something serious without proof." She leaned down, lowering her voice just enough to sound vicious. "You know what that's called where I come from? Lying." Ava's throat tightened. Phones were fully out now. No one pretended otherwise. The humiliation had become entertainment. "You think you're special because you're sitting in first class?" Marilyn continued. "Because you got lucky with a seat assignment? That doesn't make you important. It makes you temporary." The word temporary cut deeper than shouting ever could. The purser stepped in, uneasy. "Marilyn, maybe we should—" "No!" Marilyn snapped. "This has gone far enough." She turned to Ava again, eyes cold. "You want to talk policy? Fine. Airline policy says disruptive passengers can be removed before takeoff, and I am this close to recommending that." Ava looked around the cabin, at the men in tailored suits, the women with diamond bracelets, the people who would later say they felt uncomfortable but did nothing. "I'm not being disruptive," Ava said. "I'm asking for safety," Marilyn scoffed. "Safety? You don't even know what that word means." Ava's voice wavered for the first time. "Yes, I do." "Oh, really?" Marilyn said mockingly. "Go ahead, educate us." Ava swallowed. Her father had warned her about this moment. The moment when truth invites ridicule. The food smells spoiled, Ava said. If it's contaminated and someone gets sick, that's not just a mistake. That's corporate negligence. The cabin froze. Marilyn stared at her, then smiled, slow and cruel. Listen to her, she said, shaking her head, throwing around big words like she's in court. She leaned closer, voice dripping with poison. You don't get to talk about legal accountability when you're a child who can't even finish her breakfast. Ava's eyes burned. Enough, Marilyn said sharply. This is your last chance. Eat the food, or we escort you off this plane. A tear slipped down Ava's cheek before she could stop it. The sight made Marilyn roll her eyes. Oh, spare me, she muttered. Crying doesn't make you right. No one moved. No one spoke. The silence was no longer passive. It was complicit. Ava closed her eyes for a brief moment. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Psalm 34-18. She breathed in slowly, out slowly. Then she did something unexpected. She pushed the tray away, not in defiance, not in drama, but in calm refusal. I won't eat it, Ava said, and I won't leave. Marilyn's face hardened. Then you leave me no choice. She raised her communicator again. Captain, I recommend removal. Passenger is refusing compliance. The word removal echoed like a threat. Ava looked up at her, not with fear, not with anger, but with something that unsettled Marilyn deeply. Understanding. Before you do that, Ava said quietly, you should know something. Marilyn laughed. Oh, please, what now? Ava's voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. My father helped design the contamination escalation protocol you're ignoring. The cabin went silent, not the awkward kind, the dangerous kind. If you have ever seen injustice happen in public while authority abused silence, then what comes next will make your heart pound. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and stay with Dignity Voices, where truth always outlasts power. Because Ava stops speaking, and her silence begins to terrify everyone who thought they were untouchable. After Ava's last sentence, the cabin did not explode. It withdrew. The laughter that had hovered earlier evaporated so completely, it felt as though someone had reached into the air and pulled the sound out by hand. Even the hum of the engines seemed to lower, slipping into the background like a breath being held. Marilyn Holt remained standing in the aisle, her communicator still, raised, frozen mid-authority. Her face held a smile that no longer reached her eyes. It was the kind of smile people wore when they sensed control slipping but refused to acknowledge it. That's impressive, Marilyn said finally, her voice brittle. Very rehearsed. Ava did not respond. She leaned back into the wide first-class seat, its leather cool against her shoulders, and folded her hands neatly in her lap. The movement was small, almost unnoticeable, but it marked a decision. She had said what needed to be said. Now she waited. Marilyn mistook the silence for retreat. You see, she said loudly, scanning the cabin as if for applause. Quiet at last. That's all we needed. No one clapped. No one nodded. Several passengers avoided her eyes altogether now. A woman near the window stared straight ahead, lips pressed together. A man across the aisle lowered his phone slowly, the screen still glowing in his palm, as though he'd suddenly realized he was recording something he didn't fully understand. Marilyn shifted her weight, unsettled. Captain, she said again into her communicator, her voice sharper now. I'm standing by for removal authorization. Nothing came back. She frowned and tried again. Captain, do you copy? Still nothing. The pause stretched. 5 seconds. 10. Marilyn laughed too quickly, the sound forced. Typical, she muttered. Cockpit probably busy. But the purser had not moved. He stood a few steps away, eyes no longer flicking nervously between Marilyn and Ava. He was looking at Ava directly now, not as a child, not as a problem, but as a variable he had miscalculated. Miss, he said slowly, carefully. Earlier, you mentioned a protocol. Marilyn snapped her head toward him. Don't indulge this. He didn't look at her. Yes, sir, Ava replied. Her voice was calm again, steady. The tremor from moments earlier had vanished, replaced by something quieter and deeper. What protocol? The purser asked. Ava inhaled once. She did not rush. Her father had taught her that accuracy mattered more than speed. Pre-departure food contamination escalation, she said. Level 3. The purser's brows knit together. Marilyn scoffed loudly. Oh, please. You expect us to believe a 12-year-old understands internal safety classifications? Ava didn't look at Marilyn. She kept her eyes on the purser. Level 1 is internal replacement, Ava continued evenly. Level 2 is documentation with post-flight review. Level 3 requires immediate captain notification before takeoff because passenger exposure has already occurred. The cabin was silent enough to hear someone swallow. The purser's hand tightened around his tablet. He didn't speak right away. Marilyn waved a dismissive hand. Anyone can memorize jargon. That doesn't make it real. Ava turned her head then, slowly, and met Marilyn's eyes. It wasn't defiance. It was certainty. Level 3 also transfers responsibility, Ava said quietly. If it's ignored, liability moves from service to operations. The word liability landed like a weight dropped on glass. Marilyn's smile flickered, just for a moment. That's enough, she snapped. You're done playing lawyer. The purser exhaled. Marilyn, he said, did you log this complaint? She stiffened. There was nothing to log. He looked down at the tray again, the same tray he had avoided touching earlier. Slowly, deliberately, he leaned down and smelled the food. His face changed, not dramatically, not theatrically, but enough. He straightened immediately. Captain needs to be informed. Marilyn laughed, but the sound cracked in the middle. You're overreacting. No, he said quietly. We're reacting correctly. A ripple passed through the cabin. Not movement, awareness. Phones rose again, openly now. Marilyn's voice sharpened. You're taking her side? I'm taking procedure's side, the purser replied. Marilyn stared at him, stunned. You're going to let a child tell us how to run this airline? The purser didn't answer that. He turned and walked toward the cockpit. Purpose replaced hesitation in every step. Marilyn spun back toward Ava, her authority suddenly compressed into something smaller, more dangerous. You think this means something? She hissed. You think you've done something clever? Ava stayed seated, still, unmoving. You embarrassed yourself, Marilyn continued. That's all this is. You'll get off this plane and the world will forget you. Ava lifted her eyes, not in anger, in sadness. I didn't want to embarrass anyone, she said softly. I wanted you to listen. The words hit harder than shouting ever could. Marilyn recoiled slightly, as if slapped. Outside, the window, runway lights blinked steadily. The plane remained motionless, engines idling like a held breath. The purser returned moments later. His face was pale. The captain is reviewing the protocol, he said. Marilyn's jaw tightened. About time. He wants the food secured, the purser added, and he's requesting documentation. Marilyn's composure finally fractured. This is ridiculous. The purser didn't argue. He collected the tray carefully, sealing it in a bag. Ava watched quietly. She closed her eyes for just a second. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10. Her father had always explained that verse differently than most. Stillness isn't weakness, he'd said. It's alignment. Marilyn leaned closer again, lowering her voice. You think this ends well for you? Ava opened her eyes. I think truth ends where it's supposed to, she replied. Marilyn scoffed. You're still a child. Yes, Ava said, but I was taught to pay attention. The purser stepped between them subtly, not confrontationally, but firmly. "Marilyn," he said, "please return to your station." For the first time since boarding, Marilyn hesitated. She glanced around the cabin, at the phones, the faces, the silence that no longer belonged to her. Then she turned sharply and walked away. Ava remained seated. She did not smile. She did not relax. She simply waited. Because she knew, deep in her chest, that once systems started moving, they didn't stop for pride. The cabin doors were still closed. The plane had not moved an inch. But the balance of power had shifted completely, and everyone on board felt it. The cockpit door opened without a sound loud enough to announce itself. But everyone felt it. It was the subtle click of a sealed authority releasing, the kind of sound you only notice when something irreversible is about to happen. The murmur that had lingered in the first-class cabin evaporated instantly, as if the air itself had been instructed to stay still. Captain Reynolds stepped out. He did not hurry. He did not scan the cabin for approval. His presence carried the calm certainty of a man who had learned over decades that real control never raised its voice. Phones froze mid-recording. Conversations died unfinished. Marilyn Holt straightened at once, her body reacting before her mind could catch up. She smoothed the front of her uniform, summoned a professional smile, and stepped forward as if this were merely another inconvenience she would manage away. "Captain," she said crisply, "I've got the situation under control. A misunderstanding with a minor passenger." Captain Reynolds didn't respond. He didn't even look at her. Instead, he walked down the aisle. Each step landed with measured restraint. Not heavy, not dramatic, but intentional, as though he were following a line only he could see. He passed. Silent rows of passengers who were suddenly very aware that whatever privilege had protected them moments ago no longer mattered. He stopped at seat 1A, in front of Ava. Ava looked up slowly. Her hands were folded in her lap, fingers interlaced tightly enough to show effort, not fear. Her back pressed against the leather seat, shoulders squared in quiet endurance. She did not look like a child seeking rescue. She looked like someone who had already decided to tell the truth and live with what followed. Captain Reynolds lowered himself slightly so they were eye level. "Miss," he said gently, "my purser tells me you raised a safety concern before departure." "Yes, sir," Ava replied. Her voice was steady now, not rehearsed, not defensive, steady in the way that comes when you've already endured the worst part. "What kind of concern?" he asked. "The food," Ava said. "It smelled spoiled. I didn't feel safe eating it." The captain nodded once. "And when you reported it," he continued, "you referenced a level 3 escalation." "Yes, sir." That made him pause, not because he doubted her, but because he understood what that meant. "Who taught you that?" he asked. Ava hesitated, not from uncertainty, but from memory. "My father," she said quietly. The captain's expression shifted just slightly, not surprise, recognition. "What was your father's name?" he asked. Ava swallowed. The cabin felt impossibly large in that moment. "Daniel Carter." The name moved through the cabin like a pressure change. Captain Reynolds froze. Not subtly, not politely. He straightened slowly, as though the words had reached somewhere deep inside him. The purser's breath caught. A man 2 rows back whispered, "No." Under his breath, someone else lowered their phone, suddenly aware they were recording something they didn't understand yet. Marilyn laughed. Too fast, too loud. "Captain, I'm sure that's a coincidence," she said. "Lots of people share names." Captain Reynolds lifted one hand. She stopped speaking instantly. "Daniel Carter," he repeated. His voice carried now, not raised, but weighted. "He was one of the principal architects of pre-departure contamination protocol after the Atlanta catering incident," he said. He argued that food safety failures were not accidents. They were decisions. The cabin leaned inward without moving. "He testified before Congress," the captain continued. "He rewrote how escalation works when service negligence intersects with passenger exposure." Ava felt her chest tighten. "He saved lives," Captain Reynolds added quietly, including mine. The silence that followed was absolute. Marilyn's professional mask cracked just for a fraction of a second before she forced it back into place. That still doesn't prove, she began. Captain Reynolds turned toward her. The look stopped the sentence where it stood. Ms. Holt, he said evenly, why was this protocol not logged? Marilyn blinked. Because there was nothing to log. The passenger exaggerated. She's been disruptive since boarding. Captain Reynolds gestured toward the sealed food bag in the purser's hands. We'll let evidence decide that. He turned back to Ava. After you reported the issue, he asked, did anyone inspect the meal? No, sir. Were you warned about consequences? Yes. Were you threatened with removal? Ava nodded once. Yes. A ripple passed through the cabin, not sound, but awareness. People shifted in their seats, realizing what they had just witnessed, and allowed. Captain Reynolds straightened fully now. His presence filled the aisle without effort. That is unacceptable, he said. Marilyn's voice sharpened. Captain, we are already delayed. This is unnecessary. We are delayed, he replied calmly, because safety was dismissed. He turned to the purser. Log this as a confirmed pre-departure escalation. Notify operations, compliance, and catering oversight. This aircraft will not move. Marilyn's face drained of color. Captain, she tried again. No, he said gently. You will not speak now. The words were not angry. They were final. Captain Reynolds addressed the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, thank you for your patience. We are conducting a mandatory safety review. Your cooperation is appreciated. No one objected. No one complained. Everyone understood. Then he turned back to Ava. Your father believed systems exist to protect people, he said softly, especially when power forgets its responsibility. Ava's eyes burned. He told me silence doesn't mean surrender, she said. It means you're listening. The captain nodded once. He taught you well. Marilyn stepped forward, panic breaking through her posture. Captain, you can't seriously? Captain Reynolds turned fully toward her. Ms. Holt, he said, you are relieved of duty effective immediately. The words landed with surgical precision. Gasps filled the cabin. You will disembark with security, he continued, and cooperate fully with the investigation. Marilyn opened her mouth. No sound came out. This airline will address accountability, the captain added, not embarrassment. Security appeared moments later. Marilyn did not resist. She did not look at Ava. She walked off the aircraft in silence. When the doors closed again, something fundamental had shifted inside the cabin. Captain Reynolds returned his attention to Ava. Miss Carter, he said, would you like a replacement meal prepared after inspection? Ava shook her head gently. No, thank you. What would you like? He asked. Ava thought for a moment. Water is fine, she said. The captain smiled, not indulgently, but with respect. As he returned to the cockpit, the plane remained grounded. No applause followed. Justice didn't need noise. Ava leaned back into her seat. Her father's voice echoed softly in her memory. When truth speaks, systems move, and they already were. If you have ever been judged, dismissed, or silenced before being heard, stay with this story. Like and subscribe, and stand with dignity voices, where quiet truth always finds its moment, because the system responds, and the consequences spread far beyond this flight. The aircraft did not move. That was the first consequence, and everyone felt it at once. The engines stayed at idle, humming with restrained power, while the runway lights outside continued their steady blinking. Inside the first-class cabin, time stretched into something heavy and deliberate. No one spoke. No one reached for luggage. The delay was no longer an inconvenience. It was a decision. In the cockpit, Captain Reynolds placed his headset over his ears again. His voice, when it came, was measured and exact, stripped of emotion. This was not negotiation. This was execution. Operations, this is Flight 79 Delta, he said. Level 3 contamination escalation is confirmed and logged. He listened, eyes steady on the instruments. No, we will not taxi, he continued. Yes, documentation is uploading now. Loop in corporate compliance, catering oversight, and safety review. He ended the call and exhaled slowly, shoulders settling. Once the escalation was logged, authority no longer belonged to individuals. It belonged to process. The first officer worked silently beside him, screens updating in sequence. Green indicators disappeared, replaced by amber and red. Timestamps locked, checklists reconfigured. The aircraft itself seemed to recognize that something fundamental had changed. In the cabin, the purser returned from the cockpit with his tablet held firmly against his chest. His posture was different now. The nervous energy that had marked his earlier movements was gone, replaced by something steadier and more resolved. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said calmly, "thank you for your patience. We are entering a mandatory compliance hold. Please remain seated." No one objected. A few passengers glanced at their watches, then at one another. Whatever irritation they had carried earlier dissolved into a quiet understanding. This was no longer about schedules. It was about accountability. 2 rows back, a man in a tailored gray suit leaned toward his companion. "This isn't operational," he murmured. "This is legal." She nodded slowly. Someone skipped a step they shouldn't have. Ava sat silently in seat 1A, her gaze fixed on the window. The tight knot in her chest had loosened slightly, replaced by a deep fatigue. She recognized the feeling. It was the exhaustion that came after standing firm without raising your voice. Outside, a ground vehicle rolled past beneath the wing, its lights flashing briefly against the metal. The world beyond the glass seemed strangely normal. Her father used to call this moment the quiet middle. The space after truth was spoken, but before consequences became visible. He had warned her it was always the longest part. Minutes passed, then more. A soft chime sounded overhead as an internal system connected. The purser stepped aside, listening intently. "Yes," he said. "Understood. She is still on board." He ended the call and walked directly toward Ava. "Miss Carter," he said gently, "corporate compliance would like to speak with you, only if you're comfortable." Ava nodded. "I am." She followed him toward the galley, where a secure internal line had been established. Captain Reynolds stood nearby, not hovering, not directing, simply present. His presence felt grounding, rather than imposing. A headset was placed carefully into Ava's hands. A calm, professional voice came through the line. "Miss Carter, this is airline compliance." Ava listened without speaking. "We want to acknowledge that you followed escalation protocol correctly," the voice continued. "We also recognize that you were subjected to conduct that does not meet our standards." Ava closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the words. "We are initiating a formal investigation," the voice said. "This will include crew conduct, supervisory oversight, and catering chain compliance." The word oversight carried weight. It meant this would not end with one person. Ava spoke quietly. "I didn't want anyone to be punished. I just didn't want someone to get sick." There was a pause on the line, long enough to feel deliberate. "That," the voice replied, "is exactly why these systems exist." The call ended. Ava returned the headset and walked back toward her seat. As she passed through the aisle, several passengers shifted instinctively, creating space. One woman met her eyes and gave a small nod. It wasn't praise, it was recognition. Back in the cockpit, updates continued to cascade. Catering manifests were pulled from the system. Inspection records appeared on screen. Timestamps failed to align. A required preloading verification had been bypassed to meet departure metrics. That decision, made hours earlier by someone far from this aircraft, was now exposed. Corporate leadership was notified. Legal counsel was looped in. By the time the wheels eventually left the ground, this incident would already have a case number, a review team, and a trail of accountability. Captain Reynolds keyed the intercom once more. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said. "Thank you for your patience. The safety review is ongoing. We will update you shortly." The cabin exhaled collectively. Relief moved through the space, not because people were eager to leave, but because clarity had returned. The purser approached Ava again, holding a sealed bottle of water. "Inspected and logged," he said quietly. "Thank you," Ava replied. She took a sip and leaned back into her seat, resting her head against the leather. The hum of the engines changed pitch, subtle but unmistakable. The aircraft was preparing again. The system had finished listening. Now it would act. As the plane finally began to taxi, no one applauded. No one celebrated. Justice did not announce itself. It moved forward on documentation, checklists, and responsibility. Ava closed her eyes as the aircraft rolled toward the runway. Her father's voice surfaced in her memory, steady and certain. "Justice is not loud," he had told her. "It is exact." Behind them, investigations were already unfolding. Ahead of them, consequences waited. As the aircraft crept forward, messages multiplied beyond the cockpit. In a glass-walled conference room thousands of miles away, early morning lights flicked on as compliance officers opened files and began reading. Names were added, checklists expanded. What had started as a single decision now touched departments that rarely spoke to one another, except in moments like this. Emails marked urgent moved from inbox to inbox. A catering supervisor paused mid-coffee as a notification appeared on her screen. A regional director scrolled through timestamps, lips tightening. None of them knew Ava's face. None of them needed to. The system was not built to care who you were, only what had happened. Back in first class, conversations resumed in whispers. A man rehearsed an apology he would never deliver. A woman stared at her phone, realizing she had recorded something that felt uncomfortably personal. The cabin was full of people reevaluating the difference between witnessing and intervening. Ava remained still. She did not replay the confrontation. She did not imagine outcomes. She focused instead on the steady movement of the plane, the certainty of forward motion. For the first time since boarding, she allowed herself to feel small again, not in humiliation, but in relief. She thought of her father standing at the kitchen table late at night, diagrams spread out, explaining why rules mattered. He had told her that justice was not a moment. It was a sequence. Miss one step, and everything that followed collapsed. The aircraft turned onto the main runway. Engines spooled higher. The world outside blurred slightly as momentum gathered. Inside the cockpit, Captain Reynolds confirmed the final checklist. Compliance flags remained open, but procedures were satisfied. Accountability had been activated. That was enough for now. As the plane accelerated, Ava pressed her fingers lightly against the armrest, grounding herself. The nose lifted. Gravity shifted. The ground fell away. The flight was finally airborne. But far below, the consequences were just beginning to take shape. Systems remembered her silence, and the record would ensure it was never ignored again by anyone, anywhere, ever. The headlines did not break immediately. At first, the world continued as if nothing had happened. The aircraft landed. Passengers disembarked. Luggage rolled across polished airport floors. But beneath that ordinary motion, systems were already grinding into alignment, pulling threads that would not stop unraveling. By the time Ava stepped into the terminal, her name had not appeared anywhere. That was intentional. Compliance teams preferred quiet beginnings. They worked best before the story learned how to speak. Inside the airline's headquarters, a glass-walled conference room filled with people who had not planned to meet that morning. Laptops opened, screens flickered. The incident file expanded in real time, populated by timestamps, internal notes, and silent red flags. A catering supervisor stared at the screen, brow furrowed. "This was signed off," she said. "Yes," a compliance officer replied, "by someone who skipped verification." A pause followed. "That makes it systemic." The words settled heavily. Across the table, legal counsel leaned back, arms crossed. "We're not dealing with a rogue employee," he said. "We're dealing with a process failure." No one argued. In another building, human resources initiated a parallel review. Training records were pulled, Performance notes surfaced. Patterns emerged where excuses had once lived. Language that had been dismissed as tone issues now appeared alongside documented complaints. Someone whispered, "Why wasn't this escalated before?" No one answered. At the airport, Ava sat quietly near a window, legs dangling from the chair. She watched planes take off one by one, silver bodies lifting into the sky. Her phone buzzed once with a message from an unfamiliar number, then went still again. She did not open it. She was tired in a way that sleep would not fix. Across the country, an internal memo circulated among senior executives. The subject line was neutral, deliberately understated, but the content was not. Mandatory review, immediate suspension, external audit. A vice president frowned at the screen. "This will leak," he said. "Yes," another replied, "but it shouldn't have happened in the first place." Silence followed. Later that afternoon, the first notification reached Marilyn Holt. It arrived without drama. No accusation, no explanation. Just a formal notice requesting her presence at a disciplinary hearing and advising her not to contact colleagues. She read it twice, hands trembling slightly. For the first time, there was no uniform to hide behind. By evening, catering contracts were under review. Inspection procedures were frozen pending audit. A third-party firm was contacted. Meetings were scheduled that no one wanted to attend. In a newsroom miles away, a junior reporter scanned a tip line submission. The details were thin, anonymized, but specific enough to raise questions. She flagged it for follow-up. "Something's off," she said to her editor. He nodded. "Keep digging." The next morning, the first article appeared. It did not mention Ava by name. It didn't need to. The headline spoke of safety lapses, internal failures, and a pre-departure escalation that exposed deeper problems. The language was careful, sourced, undeniable. Shares dipped slightly. Public relations teams mobilized. Statements were drafted, revised, softened, then revised again. At headquarters, a senior executive stared out a window as notifications stacked on his screen. "This isn't about optics," he said quietly. "This is about trust." In the following days, consequences became visible. Marilyn Holt was formally terminated. Not publicly, not dramatically, just permanently. Supervisors who had ignored prior complaints were reassigned, then quietly released. Mandatory retraining was announced across the company. Policies were rewritten with language that left no room for interpretation. Passengers noticed subtle changes, new procedures, extra checks, slower service that felt deliberate rather than careless. Behind the scenes, legal teams negotiated settlements with suppliers. Penalties were assessed, contracts were amended, documentation grew thicker. The system corrected itself the only way it knew how, slowly, thoroughly, without apology. Ava watched none of this unfold directly. She returned to school. She sat in class. She completed assignments. Life resumed its ordinary rhythm, though something inside her had shifted. One afternoon, she finally opened the message on her phone. It was from airline compliance. A brief note. Gratitude. Confirmation that changes were underway. Assurance that her actions had mattered. She stared at the screen for a long moment, then set the phone aside. She did not feel triumphant. She felt resolved. Weeks later, another article appeared. This one spoke of reforms, new oversight, and a commitment to safety. It quoted executives who spoke carefully about accountability. It referenced an unnamed incident that had forced the company to confront uncomfortable truths. Readers nodded. Some moved on, others remembered. At an airport far from the original flight, a catering worker checked a seal twice before signing off. A supervisor paused before dismissing a complaint. A flight attendant chose a different tone. Small changes, but real. Ava sat at a gate with her backpack at her feet, watching the departure board update. Planes arrived. Planes departed. Systems continued doing what they were designed to do when allowed. She thought of her father again, of the patience he had preached, the faith he placed in process. Justice was not a moment. It was momentum, and once it began, It carried farther than anyone expected. Time passed the way it always does after something irreversible. Not loudly, not all at once. It moved forward in ordinary days, measured by mornings and evenings, by routines that returned even after the world had shifted beneath them. Ava sat at gate C-17, feet swinging slightly above the polished floor. The airport around her hummed with quiet efficiency, rolling suitcases, murmured announcements, the soft rhythm of departures and arrivals. She looked older now, not much, but enough to notice. Experience had a way of settling into posture before it ever showed on the face. Across the terminal, a digital screen scrolled headlines. One of them caught her eye, though she didn't lean closer. Airline finalizes settlement agreement following internal safety review. She read it once, then looked away. The article had appeared weeks earlier. It spoke of reforms, of compensation, of structural changes that executives promised would prevent future failures. It included a carefully worded executive apology issued during a quarterly earnings call, delivered with the right tone and the right pauses. Analysts had praised the company's reputation management response, noting how swiftly the narrative had shifted from crisis to reform. Ava hadn't watched the broadcast. Her teacher at school had mentioned it in passing, not knowing the connection. "It's good when companies take responsibility," she'd said. Ava had nodded. Responsibility, she was learning, looked different depending on where you stood. Her phone buzzed softly in her backpack. Ava reached in and pulled it out. A message notification appeared, familiar now. Airline compliance. The thread had gone quiet after the final update, but this one was new. It was brief, informational, polite. The investigation had concluded. Oversight changes were permanent. Additional training protocols were mandatory. A line near the end mentioned brand accountability as a guiding principle going forward, not as marketing language, but as policy language. Ava read it carefully. She did not feel proud. She felt settled. Her grandmother used to say that peace felt less like celebration and more like balance returning to a room after furniture had been rearranged. Ava understood that now. Nothing sparkled, nothing applauded. But something was right again. Outside the tall windows, a plane lifted smoothly into the sky. Ava followed it with her eyes until it disappeared into the clouds. She thought of her father, not as he had been during hearings or interviews, not standing behind podiums or speaking into microphones, but as he had been at the kitchen table late at night. Papers spread out, diagrams half drawn, explaining patiently why systems mattered. "People forget," he used to say. "That's why we build reminders into the structure." Ava folded her hands in her lap. "The integrity of the upright guides them," her father had once read aloud, "but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity." Proverbs 11:3. She had not understood the verse then. She did now. A family passed by her seat, a little boy tugging at his mother's sleeve, asking questions she barely heard. Life continued. It always did. The world rarely paused to acknowledge moral victories, and maybe that was the point. Ava stood when her boarding group was called. She slung her backpack over one shoulder and joined the line, moving forward without urgency. When she reached the counter, the gate agent smiled at her, scanned her pass, and wished her a good flight. No one stared, no one whispered, no one questioned whether she belonged. As she walked down the jet bridge, Ava felt a familiar calm settle in her chest. Not confidence exactly. Something quieter. Trust. She took her seat near the window this time. Not first class, not economy, just a seat. She buckled in and rested her head back, watching ground crews move below with careful coordination. She thought of the people she would never meet who had changed their behavior because of what had happened. The supervisor who double-checked a report, the attendant who paused before dismissing a concern, the executive who learned perhaps for the first time that accountability could not be polished into a slogan. None of them knew her name. That was fine. Justice, her father had taught her, was not about being seen. It was about being effective. As the plane began to taxi, Ava closed her eyes briefly. "What does the Lord require of you?" The verse surfaced in her mind. to act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. Micah 6:8. The aircraft lifted smoothly into the air. Gravity shifted. The ground fell away. Ava looked out the window one last time before the clouds swallowed the view. She was not thinking about the past anymore. She was thinking about the future and how quietly it had been protected. This story isn't about winning arguments or watching someone fall. It's about choosing integrity when it would be easier to stay silent and trusting that truth, spoken calmly, still has power. If you've ever felt small in a space that tried to make you invisible, remember this. Justice doesn't need noise to work. It needs courage, patience, and faith. If this story moved you, like, subscribe, and stay with Dignity Voices. Here, we believe quiet strength still changes the world, one truth at a time.